7:05, call the meeting to order. Traxel, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Everybody's here. The board has public notice been given.
Yes, it has.
Right, on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve prior meeting minutes of March 18th, 2026? The move. Should made by Mr. Billion, or second? Second, Mrs. Thompson, any discussion? Billion.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right, information, summary of discussions for March 18th, 2026.
I forgot I was supposed to take, who made that motion? I got the vote, but Scott and seconded by? Thank you. Okay, summary is what it's always been. It's just with the transcript, AI assisted, and to try to capture some of the information that was discussed. So as always, look over it, and there's changes that need to be made or something that didn't reflect it accurately, let me know.
We'll move on to discussion on operational expectations and results policies. I do just want to call before we get into this, by about 8:30 or so. We'll just move on to the agenda. This 4C is going to take some discussion. So just be respectful of folks' time. I know initially we said we can keep this to 2 hours or so. So about 8:30 when we're on. We're not going to finish this anyways, most likely today. All right. So I will do what I've been continuing to do since we're just kicking this off. I will just read through the memo just so folks in the room can hear, as well as the folks online can hear as well, kind of what it is we're discussing and where it's going to go. So the background information, as part of the board's continued transition to a coherence governance model, the board has completed its initial review and discussion of governance culture, GC, and board superintendent BSR policies. These policies establish the foundation for how the board governs, how authority is delegated, and how the superintendent is held accountable. The next phase of this work involves the development of refinement of operational expectations, OE for short. The results are policies. These policies are essential to completing the governance framework and serve two distinct connected purposes. Operational expectations policies define the guardrails within which the superintendent is authorized to operate. These policies do not prescribe how work is to be done, but rather establish clear limitations and expectations related to legal compliance, treatment of students and staff, financial management, safety, communication, and other operational areas. Results policies define the outcomes the board expects for students. These represent the board's vision for student success and will ultimately be aligned with the district's strategic plan and community priorities. The OE policies presented are drafted to reflect the board's discussion to date, common themes and best practices from other districts utilizing a coherence governance model, a balance between providing meaningful guardrails and avoiding operational micromanagement. Several OE policies include options for board consideration. These options are intended to provide flexibility and allow the board to determine the appropriate level of specificity and oversight based on its governance preferences. The results policies are intentionally broad at this stage. As discussed, these will be further refined following completion of the district's strategic planning process to ensure alignment with community priorities and identified areas of focus. In addition to the draft policies, the administration has developed a set of scenarios designed to help the board stress test the OE and R policies. These scenarios are intended to clarify the distinction between governance and operations, identify areas where additional guardrails may or may not be added or needed, help the board determine what information it needs to fulfill its role without becoming involved in management, ensure the board is not surprised by significant issues while maintaining appropriate delegation. Any questions from folks so far? All right. So with that, we're gonna move into discussion on policies. Everything's pretty much in line, starting with the OE1 down the board. Similar to the board superintendent relationship and the coherence, the GCs. I'll kind of just read through the scenario discussion guide and read the policies, and we'll have some discussion. The one caveat that's different with this is the last few that we did with the board superintendent relationships and the governance culture, we tied them back to a specific policy and stress tested them that way. In this scenario, we're still going to do the same thing with some scenario with a scenario. However, we need to also choose options on what it is we want to move forward. And I think before I go any further, option 1, 2, and 3, they're all coherent governance types of how we want to define the policy. But there's different levels of it. And I don't know, Mr. Board, you probably can explain it better than I, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, you're doing a great job with it. That's exactly right. They were all the options, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, I think in one case, are all fit the mold of a coherent governance model. But the options closer to number 1 are a tighter coherent governance model. And as you move down, they become a little less loose or a little less or more flexible in terms of board's jurisdiction and on the specific guardrails. Okay, so 1 might be a little bit more broad. 3 might be more of a, okay, we want our thumb on these things, and then we may have to define what those things are. So it's kind of the spectrum of it.
In reading through them, I mean, the option 3 for the most part is where the board would have the option to kind of define some of that philosophy as well. I know in other discussions, we talked about that, most likely the best course of action is getting our feet wet and, getting a policy in place as things happen. If we don't like the outcomes or it just didn't work the way that we thought it would, then that's when we come back to the drawing board, and as a group, at a governance meeting, we would go down the option 3 road and really start to dig it into the policy and change it however, as a group it needs to be changed. So option 3 most likely probably won't be something that we do, but if the majority wants to take option 3 for some of these, we can absolutely go down that road too. So any questions from folks so far? I know there's a lot of information. Actually, so fast.
I had just one thing. I think you hit something there that needs to be reemphasized there. Right now, these governance meetings, the board is writing policy, right? Once these policies become in play, and the strategic process, planning process gets done, then the governance model, the governance meetings will really be dedicated towards that. And so you will have a lot of time to talk about the policies and how they relate to, is this what our community wants and does this fit this? So you're kind of using the governance meetings right now to, get these policies in place. But to Aaron's point about having to tweak them, you're going to have dedicated meetings where you're specifically talking about the results, the pillars of what the community is looking for, and then do our policies match that? So, I just think that that's important to emphasize there.
Yeah, because the timing is gonna be probably pretty close to when we get through all of this stuff. Hopefully have hive mind strategic plan in place where we come to the board for approvals and such, and then at that point, after we've done all this work, we will probably start diving into some of these and seeing how we can change them. If they don't quite fit the bill for what the community wants, so.
So would it be safe to say that we should just consider option one? Get the hang of it, understand the policies, get the data, let the data inform whether or not we should move any particular policy to option 2 or 3 based on what the data is telling us and what the community is.
If the board would agree, if the majority would be fine with that, then absolutely can, because option 1 has a little bit wider of a, guardrails. They get tighter and tighter down the options, like Mr. Gord said too, so it's not a bad place to start, but again, this is a board decision. So no, I appreciate you throwing that out there. All right, any other questions, discussion, comments, concerns? There's a lot of information getting thrown at you.
I guess is there, with the wording of 1, 2, and 3, there's maybe an option to maybe merge some of those ideas together. That is that not a possibility of the table to start, or is that something we can work on? Might be better off to wait.
Again, it's whatever the majority wants. Are you saying a hybrid between 1 and 2, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Or 2 and 3, or 1 and 3, or whatever the.
Once we get into the option 3, that's where it's more or less we have to define what it is. Like that's how I've been reading it the last. Correct.
Absolutely, but I want the board to have free discussion. I just tried to provide, I'm not an expert policy writer on this stuff. I just wanted to provide a starting point. So you may like the way something's phrased in option 3, but not necessarily wanting to go that deep, but you might want to use that wording elsewhere. So feel free to mix and match as the board sees fit, and just wanted to get you a starting point.
And I guess just with history of going through all the Neola policies, anytime that they had an option 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, whatever it was essentially, that was the wording that we were going to adopt. We didn't do a whole lot of manipulating with those. I was just fine to.
I'm not nearly as good as Neola, so you can wordsmith it away. So.
A year from now, we might all be really excellent policy writers. I hope not. Well, Brady's already shaking his head.
Your dream come true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for now, right now, we'll just go through them and we'll decide which avenue we want to go down, which options, so. I do have a question, Mr. Gordon. 4B's throwing me off. Is that something we're gonna even get to tonight?
What, I'm sorry, one more time?
4B.
In the agenda.
Or,
I'm not trying to agenda hop here.
yep,
but-
no, I wanted to put that on this agenda and then keep it on there unless you decide otherwise, just in case we talk about something in these policies that we're like, well, now that we've seen this, we really should look at one of the other policies we've already talked about. This gives you an agenda item to be able to kind of go back and talk about any coherent governance policies or procedures. So
Okay.
it's kind of a catch-all for coherent governance.
Okay, all
So
right.
just so we were in compliance.
Be skipping that
Yep.
one then tonight. So I guess with that, then in the future, everybody should be bringing all of their GCs, BSRs and all this stuff with them as sample reference.
And it might just be a scenario, right? Like, okay, now that we're in this, how does this look if this happens? And it might kind of blend all of them together and go beyond the scope of just the operational expectations and results. I just felt like I needed something on the agenda for us to be able to discuss it a little bit more high level without violating the agenda, I guess.
Okay, all right, good enough. Okay, so I will follow the same. Can't think of the word I'm looking for here. How I've been doing it, I'll just follow that same thing. I'll read the policy first, and then we'll jump into the discussion stuff. So OE1, treatment of students. Superintendent shall ensure that students of this district are treated with dignity, fairness, and respect in environments that are safe and conducive to learning. The superintendent shall not permit conditions that are unsafe, unlawful, or discriminatory, tolerate practices that violates students' legal or constitutional rights, allow discipline practices that are arbitrary, inconsistent, or materially unrelated to maintaining safety and supporting learning, permit practices that unnecessarily compromise student dignity, privacy, or well-being. So with that, then a scenario for OE1, treatment of students. A student posts threatening language toward another student stating he will bring a knife tomorrow. Administration investigates, determines the threat is credible, and imposes appropriate discipline. So just an initial discussion here, like what governance guardrail is being tested in this situation under policy OE1. Really, it's the superintendent shall ensure that students of this district are treated with dignity, fairness, and respect in environments that are safe and conducive to learning. Superintendent shall not permit conditions that are unsafe, unlawful, or discriminatory. There are some other questions we can go down here with this as well, just to promote some discussion here. Is this about safety systems or a specific disciplinary decision? Are folks thinking on that? Safety or disciplinary?
So I don't know if you can take one or the other, it's really both, addressing both, it's really both. Being discipline of the kid and then obviously doing something about the potential for weapon, taking care of it, so. Don't like to guess both sides of that.
Should the board be involved in this specific discipline decision?
After,
Sorry.
you just being informed after.
Yeah, I mean, as we've gone down the road, these situations where the board, wants to be involved in it, now we're stepping into the operational side and the micromanaging and managing of the day-to-day, which we're on the pathway of getting out of that. But then the other catch-22 though is what if, the board wants to be notified of all of these situations? It's something we have to define too, because if you're notified of all of them, we're getting back into that day-to-day stuff too. So I guess let's be, go down the road, we'll have to, as we define, like, what is it? Like, we've already talked about this with prior, the board superintendent relationships, actually, we talked about that quite a bit, was defining what that threshold is that we need to know.
I think that we should have that conversation.
Absolutely, at some point.
Yeah, we need to talk about what do we need to know about immediately? And what don't we need to know about? And there are some things that the board needs to know about right away.
Mhm, absolutely.
And, you know, we already get that information because Steve gives it to us, but again, we have to act as if Steve isn't, you know, isn't gonna be here the rest of the days. So, you know, thinking through, what does that look like for our community? And again, considering what is the tolerance of our community, what is different than what other communities are just gonna say, so we have to make sure that we're really being responsive.
Yeah. Sure.
And so this isn't the time to have that conversation, is what you're saying. We wait until we get the data from.
Yeah, I don't know if we can define it right now. Unless you all think we can.
That's discussion.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's not really tied to this. That's a different policy.
There's a, I was just gonna say, there's a policy, OE7, communication and board assurance, which I think will address a lot of those things.
Yeah, it's a different policy, sorry. Okay. I'm not trying to tell you no, but
No, that's
not for
perfect.
this specific one. It actually ties back to other ones
Yep.
as well, so it's a bigger discussion. I think that's where it would fall more into that for the high level, where we're really getting in, we're pulling in all of those different policies that we're working on, because they all kind of touch on one another, and that's where we would probably really start to define the details, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense.
To Jill's point, though, I think it is important that at some point we do have that discussion, because what I think, even now, right, and I appreciate that you feel like I've communicated well with you, but what I think, like, that's minimal, right? That happens all the time, but for whatever reason, it gets to a higher level, right? Is that something you should have known about? Is that something I should have known that it was going to get to a higher level? Or is that just something that, you know, reached a higher level due to unforeseen circumstances? So having that discussion even with this group, I think is beneficial for everyone, just to know what the expectations are and moving forward.
No, good discussion. Any other discussion folks want to have before we dive into the options?
You know, when you're looking at staff or student safety, I think that's pretty. When you're looking at staff and student safety, I think that is very high on the list of things that the board needs to know about. But it looks like in the OE7, that was specifically addressed. So in this particular circumstance, it looks like it's something that we be made aware of. So looks like it's covered.
Yeah, I think that particular, maybe I should grab another microphone now, sorry. No longer have a gym voice. In that particular example where, you know, they find that the threat is credible, right? There's a real chance that a student could have brought a knife and possibly done harm with it, right? That obviously reaches a certain level. What if a student says that and it's not credible, right? You just, you know, it's a student to just impulsively just blurted it out, right? And administration looks at it like, this is not a credible. Is that something that the board would want to know about, right? Is that no longer still might get, he or she may still get discipline, but it might not be to the extent of somebody who's got a viable threat. What if it's a third grader, right? It says it on the playground, I'm gonna kill you. I mean, we've talked about some of these threats anyway, right? But again, it's kind of having these discussions and talking about safety, and then what does the board need to know and want to know? Think about those kinds of things so that we don't have surprises. You don't, and I don't. And what if it wasn't even said? Nobody, somebody just made it up, right?
And that happens.
John didn't really say it, and 4 other people around it, nobody heard it. Brian just said John said it, right? I mean, that to me is an entirely different set of discipline, but there's no longer a threat, right? And probably never was one.
There's a part of me that wants to say, obviously, with social media, regardless if the kids can have their phones on their person right now or not. If the rumor mill gets and it starts spreading around the school, and it gets home to the families, and you all know, all the administrators know that it's not a threat. But the children don't. Right? And then somebody gets a hold of one of us. That's when I would think you probably need to let us know, so that we can say, listen, it's being handled, and here is the assurance that we can give you. That's a slippery slope too, because there's a lot of instances. I guess you'd have to use your best judgment to some degree. Because lots of things get said every single day.
Right. Yep.
And you kind of know. People give you a heads up. People give you a heads up saying, what, this one's getting around. Sure.
Discussion, any other discussion before we jump into selecting the action here? All right, well, I'll read this aloud. Just go on the record so folks watch online, they can follow along with us. So option 1 is the safety and order model. The superintendent shall ensure discipline practices maintain safe, orderly, and respectful learning environments. Part of option 1 would be it emphasizes safe, orderly environments, but also maintains flexibility in implementation. Option 2 is a developmental responsibility model. Superintendent shall ensure discipline practices promote student responsibility and personal growth while maintaining safety and order. Some follow-ups on that. Option 2 also adds a student growth emphasis and still maintains governance level expectations. And option 3 is a board-defined philosophy model. The board may adopt a student conduct philosophy statement consistent with law and its governance values. And with option 3, just more supporting information as it allows more detailed articulation, but may reduce flexibility. So options 1, 2, and 3, I want people to kind of speak open and freely on what you're thinking as far as how we want to define student conduct at the governance level.
What's that?
You look like you're gonna say something.
I was gonna say.
She asked for a while.
Everybody's been looking at me. All right, here we go. I'll throw this out here. I like 1, but I really like the wording of promoting student responsibility and personal growth. Because making them own up to their own mistakes, so to speak, being responsible for it, because I just feel like that is so kicked by the wayside. So I like it.
Yeah, I'm assuming, Mr. Board, it's got some level of student accountability. Owning it.
I mean.
Is that where it was kind of going with student responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think it extends beyond just simple safety and extends into more of character and growth along with the safety. Option one sticks into we're gonna have a safe environment, right? Option two is a little bit more of well, as it says, personal growth. Possibly, slightly more, subject to interpretation, and somebody has to define what, developmental responsibility looks like. It sounds great, right? That's what we want to do. But, then there's that added layer, kind of like Aaron mentioned earlier, like option three, then that's going to require the board to really define. Even this is probably going to require the board or administration to define what that looks like. So does the board want to stay exclusively into a safety, right? And make sure that students are treated fair and equitable and with dignity and our environment safe? Or do they want a little bit more of, and we should be promoting that wording of character and growth, personal growth?
Similar to the hybrid that Scott was mentioning.
For me, one of our responsibilities as a school district is to help these kids develop and be good citizens once they leave our walls. And if we're not helping all the way through, them take responsibility and understand, and consequences all you want, but if they don't step up to understanding why what they're doing is inappropriate or whatever, that we're gonna end up having kids that just get passed through that, yeah, hey, look at my disciplinary report, I've got all these things, but I didn't learn anything from it. And they continue to do it, so it's helping them take responsibility for it, personal growth from it, so to help prevent them from going down that path again. Just this was the one that made me question the being hybrid for it.
I 100% agree, and I think that the board needs to have the conversation about when we put these things in policy drives a lot of things. And staffing would be one of them. And so when you think about the load, not that I'm trying to sway us in a different direction, because I'm not at all. But I also want to make sure we're all very, very aware of the load that it takes for an administrator or other and teachers and the people that are in the classrooms to go beyond safety and to very much teach how to interact with one another, how to respond when conflict happens, how to those are skills, and it takes a lot of time. And at different levels, it takes even more time. And so, not that I'm saying, I just want to make sure that when we're having these conversations, we're recognizing that there's going to be a ripple effect. And we need to be aware of that. I agree. I couldn't agree more, that there's a ripple effect. Because it's going to put more time on certain people in the district. For sure, for a bit, until systems are in place.
My thought on that is you create a culture.
Oh, sure.
And if the culture, and it takes a while to create that culture, but if that culture shifts, we do this starting with pre-K, kindergarten, everything in primary school that's just gonna hopefully build on itself and want to be a district of envy. That's part of it, is creating a culture where kids know that there are higher expectations than just a regular school. So that's why I feel that responsibility and growth needs to be included in it.
I agree. It's an investment in the students, so. And when you brought it up, this was the first one I thought where you combine them.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm not agreeing. I'm just trying to pose the other side, okay? Because personally, I agree with what you're saying, and professionally as well. But I would pose the question, do we know with 100% certainty that that's what our community wants? Or could our community, could we find out through this process that we want to make sure our schools are safe? And I don't care what you have to do with these kids, but make sure it's safe. And is that something that maybe we need to hear from our community to see if they agree with what folks at this table seem like they're agreeing to? Is that a fair representation of our community? I tend to think it probably is, but I don't know that for sure. And so, just think about that as well, right?
And we do have the opportunity to slide both ways, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if that was a real question or.
No, I'm just, trying to work my way through like how we make these decisions and so. So if the community is like, no, you know what, we don't need that. Here's what these are the absolute must-haves. We can move back to option one model if we decided to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would tend to think that something is going to come out of this that's going to, be something like promoting good citizens and success after school and those kinds of things, which probably aligns with what you're talking about. But just wanted to throw that out there. That do we really know? But we do know that our job as administration and as school board, even as far as state statutes, that it's our job to provide a safe environment and to treat students with dignity and respect. So that's probably how you start breaking these down when you're looking at different options.
So we roll with the hybrid on this? What I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
You're saying hybrid, you're saying option 2? Or
Option 1 with promoting student responsibility and personal growth. Right?
Superintendent shall ensure discipline practices, maintain safe, orderly, respectful learning environments, as well as promoting student responsibility and personal growth. Or something to that effect.
Yep. Perfect.
Or what?
Right, good stuff. Again, I don't want folks to feel like we're locked into any of this stuff that we're talking about tonight. Talked about the last meetings, like this is gonna be, we're gonna be changing and growing as we learn more and more of this stuff, so. All right, OE2, treatment of staff. The superintendent shall ensure that the employees of this district are treated with dignity, fairness, and respect in a professional work environment. The superintendent shall not permit unlawful or discriminatory employment practices, allow working conditions that are unsafe or materially inconsistent with applicable law, tolerate retaliation against employees for lawful reporting or professional disagreement, fail to administer employment practices in a manner consistent with applicable law, board policy, and applicable collective bargaining agreements. and fail to maintain processes that allow employees to report legal, ethical, or safety concerns without fear or retaliation. So OE2 scenario here, a staff member files a complaint alleging a hostile work environment under a building principal. Where does government oversight begin? In personal matters. In this, and then the superintendent shall ensure that the employees of this district are treated with dignity, fairness, and respect in a professional work environment. And the superintendent shall not permit unlawful or discriminatory employment practices. So kind of how that all ties back to the staff member files a complaint alleging a hostile work environment under a building principal. Should the board be involved in investigating this complaint? Folks think about that.
Not unless they're eyewitness. Otherwise, so.
Yeah, it's, no, I mean, it's an operational situation. I hope none of us are a witness to something like that. That's a different problem. When do folks think that this should rise to a board level concern?
I'd say if you got more than, if the complaints start piling up more than one. There's a handful, then obviously there's a issue that needs to be addressed.
Their thoughts on that?
Yes, if it's, I guess if it's a legal concern, I don't know about that.
Absolutely. If there's any legal exposure or something, absolutely, the board would have to know that, definitely would have to know. What would happen if the board was to start reviewing all of these complaints?
Grace change me. I think we talked about this. You can come talk to us, we can't do anything about it. Tell you to advise to speak to your supervisor, other supervisors. Go change.
Yeah, it puts us in a situation where we're doing supervisory duties at that point, getting into that day-to-day stuff. Any other discussion on this?
I know we've talked about, and I think Steve has brought it up the most, you know, in that when we talk about staff, like he said, you know, this might not always be the same people sitting in these same positions. And when we talk about the treatment of staff, does that also include superintendent, or is it just strictly the staff and not the superintendent? I just want to clarify
The
that.
latter. The superintendent would be definitely your jurisdiction. That would be your job to evaluate the superintendent.
Okay, I mean, I'm just saying at what point, if there's, you know, if we're to the top of the chain of command, we have an issue. What I'm saying is then, you know, where do we have that line then? Like Brady, as you said, you know, complaints start piling up. You know, I'm just trying to figure out what all does this encompass in this, because, you know, like Steve said, as many times, it's not gonna be the same people. You know, these are things we're putting in place for down the road, you know, which could be talking 25, 30 years down the road. I just want to make sure, we're considering all of that.
Are you talking about if there was formal complaints being filed against superintendent?
Yes, is that fall under this or is that separate from this?
That would be under the board superintendent relations. There's a policy sort of on that where it talks about accountability and such, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, because you're our sole employee.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question with that idea, so I'm glad you clarified that. So you're talking about if there's something, if there are multiple complaints about the superintendent, where does that person go and what's the board's role? in something
Yeah,
like
is that somewhere separate from this particular thing, or is this just from, principals on down type thing? I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot here, that's all.
Yeah, this specific policy should refer to everyone else.
Okay, that's
But
just,
to your point, I think we need to make sure that it's clear on how do we handle the other situation, right? And
Right.
where is that addressed? And I'd have to do some digging on that, but I'm sure it is addressed. I just don't know where off the top of my head.
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding this piece correctly.
Sure.
That and the timeline too, I mean. It wasn't all that long ago with we had a scenario where the board eventually did step in and demand action. Because the community was so in an uproar over it. Is that something you just said, okay, we're gonna get rid of the superintendent and then let the new one start over? I mean, at what point do the board step in and say, okay, enough's enough? This has gone on long enough.
Yeah, and that's where, yes, we definitely
So I mean,
have to.
you don't want to cross lines, but at the same time,
And a lot of that comes through, if we're doing evaluations and such, there has to be documentation.
Yep.
Otherwise you have no leg to stand on, especially if it did go down the non-renewal path. But I think we're gonna have to, yes. I think it was touched on a little bit in the VSRs.
A little bit, fairly
A little
broad
bit.
level, but it did touch on a little bit.
It wasn't in the weeds, it was like the 10,000 foot view. But yes, it's absolutely something that we're gonna have to define.
Yeah.
At some point here.
I just think the cleaner it is, that there's not a gray area, and it's very specific. Thank you.
I think, as if we were to better define the existing policy in the BSRs or create a whole new one, that's probably where it would fit best, would be the BSRs. So what you would think too, Steve?
Which part are you talking? Which,
What Sheila's question was. This is operational, which is the district as a whole. The board superintendent relation, I think, is where that more specific policy language would live. So how you would interpret it too?
I believe so, but I just want to clarify, are you talking about if there's allegations against the superintendent in a hostile environment? I believe that those are addressed in our Neola policies, right? Probably in the 3,000s for certified staff, similar language in the 4,000s, or in our bylaws of some sort. But if it's not, then I do think they've got to be addressed someplace, and then that's probably the logical place for them.
I was looking at something going on in a building and the superintendent's not taking action. Where does the board come into in a situation like that? To say, well, we can only discipline the superintendent, what does, where do you go after that? That's kind of what I was looking at.
Uncharted territory for all of us. figure it out.
Perfect world, that would be through the evaluation of the superintendent. They're not handling a situation properly. It might handcuff the board a little bit, like, well, how do we get rid of this rotten administrator that the superintendent didn't get rid of or take care of, right?
Yep.
By the same token, maybe that administrator is failing because of the superintendent. I don't know how that works. I would hope that any board and any superintendent would be able to work through those things together. And going back to what Jill brought up that we'll discuss in OE7, part of that's that communication, right? If you're not keeping the board informed of these things, this is what we're doing with this. This is of community interest. This is of larger scale. A reasonable board should be aware of those things, right? Then those communications should be happening in closed session and discussing them collectively. Here's what's being done. Here's what's not being done, whatever. I would sure hope that between the superintendent and the board that they would get that aligned so that those things are taking place in that setting. And if it's not, it's probably a failure on both ends, really. I mean, if the board's not demanding that to the role of the superintendent, we need an update on, right? Or the superintendent's not informing them, there's a breakdown in the system.
And I've had no complaints,
You?
Remember, I'm on medication.
Just theoretical.
That's fine.
Looks like we do have policy on both hostile work environment, and then if it blurs over into harassment, there's a different process there. So it looks like our normal policies cover that.
Yeah, when we all have time, we should read it, like all 500 pages of it.
They have started.
It's great reading. That's good discussion here. Really good stuff. Any other discussion on the treatment of staff? We're moving to the options. It's like a man's smile. Oh, Lord. Okay, option one, professional culture model. The superintendent shall promote a workplace culture characterized by professionalism, mutual respect, and conduct. Some supporting evidence for that or further stuff is emphasizes safe, orderly environments, maintains flexibility in implementation. Option two, accountability emphasis model. Superintendent shall maintain clear performance expectations that promote high standards of professional conduct. Just further on that, add student growth emphasis. Still maintains governance level expectations. And then option three is a board defined workplace statement. The board may adopt a workplace philosophy statement consistent with its governance values and legal obligations. Again, this allows a more detailed articulation, but may reduce flexibility over time. So how are folks thinking on that? You can read something again, just tell me.
I'm willing to go hybrid again on this, just because with what I do, and the different plans that I write at work, one of our standard operation procedures that we have to do, we have to be very clear in the roles of what the hygienist is, what's expected of the hygienist, what's expected of the assistant, what's expected of, because if we get a temp that comes in, we have to be able to say, here is what is expected of you today. And if somebody's not there to train them, we have to have a clear definition of their performance duties. And again, we're not going to be us all the time. Steve's not going to be Steve all the time. So that when different staff come in, they need to see a clear expectation of what they need to do and not have a lot of gray area. So I mean, again, I like one, but I do like the clear performance expectations.
So Steve, when Steve isn't himself, who is he?
Yeah, but Steven.
Jessica.
Steven, somebody, yeah.
What I meant most of the time.
When I read option one, a culture characterized by professionalism, mutual respect, and ethical conduct, I can do all those things and suck at my job. So that's, I agree with Tiffany that there has to be performance expectations. And within that is the workplace culture characterized by professionalism, all those things, I think, fall into that expectation of high performance and high standards. So I'd be okay just doing number two. But I feel that the number one is encompassed inside that.
Any thoughts from other board members?
Me too.
Again, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here. Do you want to define staff effectiveness and performance? It's kind of what number two is getting at. Do you want to define that here? Or do you want to define that through results in the results policies, right? We want our reading scores to increase, and if they don't, that's what we're measuring them on. Or is it, I mean, because I know it uses the word expectations, and maybe that's not the best word, right? I mean, I think professional expectations, properly groomed, showing up on time, treating people with dignity, language that they're using, communication, those kinds of things. Those are addressed in our handbook and our typical policy. I think what this policy is getting at is do you want this policy to get into the employee performance? Or do you want employee performance based on results? And then that would be defined in the results policies. I don't know that there's a wrong answer. I just think it needs to be one or the other.
Are the employee performances currently consistently connected with the educator effectiveness standards?
Yes. Well, all certified staff.
And so there's performance expectations that are embedded in BE. Okay. And so essentially, we're already doing number two.
So I think that's an accurate statement. With the caveat that it's done at the administrative level, not at the board level.
Yeah, and so when I was reading this, I've been rereading, the superintendent shall maintain the superintendent shall maintain, doesn't say the board shall.
True.
So I think it's still the jurisdiction over what performance expectations are based on any given person's job in the district is still under your jurisdiction. And can be defined by you, admin, whomever the leaders are.
I would agree with that.
Therefore, I think two is the place to land right now.
Another thought on that is the board's directive to include attendance. Make sure that X, Y, and Z is happening. How it gets there, what we talked about, then gets defined in those, in the handbook, in the expectations, results driven
things later, so this is, I think helps the superintendent understand that the board is expecting this out of them versus maybe just want to make sure that people are nice to each other. This is kind of how I read that first one.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things is there's already a system in place
Mhm.
that can give us data. So there's no new system that.
So you say because we're already essentially doing option two is what we should adapt currently. And then use other things like results policies, other things to further define what some of that stuff means.
What the expectations around that.
Some of that will come from the community, hopefully steering committee stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How you all feeling over there? Kind of quiet.
The only thing I was thinking about, wanting to add is that, I'm obviously very much a results oriented person, but in this realm, if you're measuring the results of what the teacher's doing, depending upon the results of what the reading skills, math skills, those results, it's based on two separate entities, one being the teacher, the other being the student. You can have a great teacher, but the student is receptive, is that it's not necessarily, in my opinion, the burden, it doesn't fall strictly upon the teacher. I mean, it's a two-way street. You have a contract there. The teacher teaches, the student takes that information and learns it and demonstrates that through the marks of, through the testing. If the test scores are skewed because maybe that relationship isn't reciprocated by the student, the teacher is kind of held on the hook for that. And so I have kind of a difficult, it's just a little bit difficult for me to say that it's strictly based on metrics from a teacher standpoint. So.
There's a couple of things, and I don't mean to step out of turn, but maybe this would help. Educator effectiveness doesn't just look at like student results. It's really a system of looking at teachers in their classroom and whether or not they are doing high quality instructional practices, like how they're setting up their classroom, how they're meeting with families. There's a plethora of different indicators that help us know whether or not a teacher is effective. And so EE gives us that kind of a viewpoint on a teacher too. So it's not, you're spot on. We can't just look at like one group of students and say, oh, because that group of students did that, this teacher's not doing their job. Yeah, 100%. And I am positive that doesn't happen. But just so everyone knows, there's a ton of different ways that teachers can be evaluated, and oftentimes it's by another professional who goes into the room, watches, takes data, and there's a lot of different layers. And so, yeah, to put your mind at ease. That doesn't happen. That isn't common practice anymore. Thank the Lord.
I just want to make sure I've got in my notes here correctly. I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I'm hearing is that what you are trying to accomplish with option 2 is to ensure that those expectations exist, and that we may talk about what those expectations are in the results policies later, but that we want to make sure that superintendent knows that these expectations exist, not what they are. Is that accurate? So if I said something like, where did I write that? Shall ensure that employees are treated with dignity, fairness, respect in a professional work environment, and that clear expectations for professional performance are established and communicated? Is that something that would work? Is it, or at least we might tweak it a little bit, but is that's what you're trying to get at here, right? Is that
Yeah.
that they exist. Okay. I don't know if I love that word, but I needed to get something down.
I think that protects them too.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
protects them, like they know exactly what's expected, and I think that's what Tiffany was saying too. Yeah.
You just don't want them coming back after the results and the expectation and go, well, you didn't say exactly I had to do this.
I didn't,
So, yeah, I didn't know that. You just don't want that conversation. don't you?
I think you bring up a good point. I know I said earlier that it should live in one or the other, but I'm rescinding that comment because as we're talking through this, and I think if we keep this policy, making sure that they exist and the results are the results, then it does keep them separate. Because you could also have the opposite of what you're talking about. You could have somebody who's getting the proper results, but isn't meeting the other expectations. And this kind of gives you both, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Great. Moving on to OE3, financial planning and budgeting. Superintendent shall develop and maintain a financial plan aligned with board adopted priorities and long-term fiscal sustainability for this district. Superintendent shall not present a budget that creates ongoing structural deficits without a board approved plan to restore balance. Use one-time revenues to support ongoing expenditures without a sustainability plan approved by the board. Engage in short-term borrowing for operational expenses without board approval. Fail to disclose material financial risks to the board. And fail to provide the board with reasonable multi-year financial projections when available. So the scenario for this one is the proposed annual budget requires eliminating 4 staff positions while a referendum is expected the following year. Just with that, if the superintendent shall develop and maintain a financial plan aligned with board adopted priorities, long-term fiscal sustainability for this district. And the superintendent shall not present a budget that creates ongoing structural deficits without a board approved plan to restore balance. So I guess in this scenario, how rigid would we want our financial guardrails to be?
Shall I keep up my streak?
Wonder what option do we exist right now, would you say? Be more of an option too at this point.
I haven't read the options quite yet. I can. I just was thinking, if anybody had anything want to discuss, as far as the policy and how it's written, and then the scenario stuff, how rigid would we want it to be? Don't read the options. Let's move right into that.
I like, yeah, read the option because I like Brian's question.
Okay. The superintendent shall maintain structurally balanced budgets absent extraordinary circumstances approved by the board. So it's more supportive things for option 1. Emphasizes stability and predictability. Focuses on fund balance targets. Option 2 is reserve stability model. Superintendent shall maintain an assigned fund balance within a board established target range. Again, that kind of just focuses on fund balance targets. And option 3, strategic flexibility model. The board may authorize temporary use of reserves or planned short-term imbalance when supported by a defined time-limited financial plan. Option 3 is, allows short-term flexibility. Currently, I think to answer your question, there is a policy in place to maintain a general fund balance. I think it's 20 or 25%, I can't remember, but
I think it's a minimum of 20, and I think we're around 25. That's not accurate.
so that's the current policy that we have now, is we do have policy language that states to maintain a healthy general fund balance, it's 20-25%.
I got a question for John. John, coming into this role, would it have been easier for you to have more guardrails up? More direction? I'm just trying to think about, like, again, we know it's working right now. But would there have been anything that the board could have done with policy that would have maybe made, I don't know, things more clear about your role?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's possible. I can't think of great examples right now off the top of my head. Clear expectations are always better than none, or when things are gray. The thing that's the financial side of education is just by its nature more black and white.
Yeah.
We probably have a little bit less to worry about in that side. But it's always helpful to have some broader, bigger conceptual ideas from a board that someone could operate underneath. Yeah.
So historically, Brady, you could probably attest to this as much as anyone. Budgets presented to the board, you mean annual budgets presented to the board, have often shown a deficit, right? I mean, there were times where I think just about every year there was a projected deficit. There was a projected deficit this year. Option 1, when you're looking at that, is saying, barring something really, 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 really odd, I don't want you to present a projected deficit to us. Figure out a way to get it to neutral, right? And then if John comes back or we come back and we say, well, that means we're going to have to, cut band and art. The board may say, well, wait, time out. Let's see if we can limp through that. Let's add this to a referendum, something like that. But that would be where the board would maybe come in, as opposed to, we're going to keep everything status quo, and then the budget is presented with a deficit in kind of everything that we have. And obviously we would make some suggestions as we did this, moving into next year, reducing some staff. But do you think that would help if the board were to say, figure out a way to get us to neutral? I mean, it's clearer, right? Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that we do all 3, really. Right.
Super.
No, I'm saying current state.
Yeah.
In my 4 years doing this, we do all 3.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would say that we've generally only presented a balanced budget and the revenues equal the expenses. I mean,
When the revenues and
Is that what it's
expenses equal the status quo.
correct. Yes, that's a better way to say it.
But to be fair though, we're presented budgets months in advance when we don't have answers from state legislature for funding. Like, there's
Sometimes that
so
is
many
true.
unknowns, so
Often.
in the end, we make it work. So really, we do get to option one most of the time. At the end, how we get there, we show deficits and all that, but it's more so that everybody's aware of, there's all these things hitting. We don't know what our, aid's gonna be for, for the state or for special education, they say it's 40% and give you 20, like, but you don't know. But it's more so just for everybody to be aware. We're not taking action on any of it. But we're all used to seeing an imbalanced budget.
Let me ask this question.
I guess that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Slightly different way. Would this board rather see, and obviously their budgets, so there are a lot of unknowns, okay, with that caveat in there. Would this board rather see a worst case scenario, right? If we're gonna estimate everything pretty conservatively, and if worst case scenario, we're gonna be negative 350, for example, but it's likely gonna be better than that. Would the board on the other end of the spectrum like to see the best case scenario, knowing that it would be utopia if that reached? Or does the board want us to really like hone in to the very penny and make your best guesses? And we realize as a board, we could end up with a surplus and we could end up with a deficit, right? Like where does this board in particular feel they want to be presented with information? Worst case, best case, or as accurate as possible, knowing it could be either side?
Let me ask this, like, John, how many times do you show us the budget before it's finalized? How many meetings? 4? 5? Somewhere in there?
Prior to starting this journey, it was, yeah. It was, 4 or 5.
Which is probably a lot of work. Especially when most of the time, it doesn't really change much from the first time to see it the second time. Sometimes not even the third time. Like, I guess where I'm going with it is to also piggyback on what you're saying. What is their frequency that it should even come to us when it's so rough? Do we need to see it 5 times when most of the time it doesn't change much at all from the 1st to the 5th? Well, the 1st to the 5th, it changes a lot. The 1st to the 4th doesn't change a whole lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm sure it's not a good use of your time to do that. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have the information, but I guess my point is, is the juice worth the squeeze if there isn't a lot of change to begin with? From reading to reading, do you even need to see it at that point?
And a lot of that momentum in history was when the annual meeting was in July. Right? We were giving, multiple updates leading up to July. Okay, and then the community, mostly board members that are there, are adopting that budget. Now, we've moved that annual meeting to be very close to October when the actual budget is really approved, so that's shifted also. Which makes giving those updates in January, February even more silly, I guess, to some extent.
That's where I was going with it, is to ask a question, because it's like we're solving for this as far as the deficits and what do we want to see. It's also how many times we need to see it.
Yeah, there's the happy medium, because you don't want to say you have a bad budget year. You don't want to wait till you're ready to approve it for the annual meeting. And all of a sudden you're $500,000 short and you're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, we should have made reductions.
Yeah.
And now we're 2 months into the school year.
Yeah.
Well, so I think-
Fiscal year.
So,
Well, yeah, where I'm going with it, I mean, I would trust that, if there was something like that being, like, might have to happen, it would come to us, it would come to a meeting. But to go through a full budget presentation for 35 minutes without such an extenuating circumstance like that, like, do we really need to do that? Because I think part of this, defining the guardrail is, if you have a situation like that, like you gotta cut staff, or you have to do something that's just out of the ordinary, like that has to come to us, even if we change the budget presentation schedule to something later in the year, we would still have to know. We can't wait until October 1st to hear about the train wreck coming.
Right.
What we knew back in February. Think about.
And just looking at that, would that fall under the target range that we want to keep it, the balance or the budget within? I mean, obviously, we want to keep it within a certain target range. If it falls out of that, it would be notified, because then it would be, okay, do we do a reduction in staff, do we do whatever?
There's probably scenarios where you could stay inside of this as it's written and not show a deficit and have this play out. So I don't know that that would necessarily cover every situation. I think you're on the right track, but it's
Utilizing.
mathematically possible to have a situation where it still followed that, but yet we were going to go into a deficit. I think you're on the right track. You want to know the potential worst case scenarios if they're looking likely. So that needs to become part of this language in the long run. It's exactly what we're trying to create here, is things like that, where you don't have to see everything all the time, but if this or this is going to happen, we have to see it. Otherwise, just make it work,
Right,
right?
right. So it's operational. It's similar to the what if a kid brought up an to school conversation. It's when do we need to know? That's what we have to decide. In what circumstances? What are the boundaries? What are the guardrails?
There's a policy in place that we have to approve reduction in staff anyways, isn't there?
I don't know if it explicitly says that or if it's just part of the budget. I have to look.
I don't remember either. If I remember reading something about it a long time ago.
Are you folks leaning more towards? Okay, let me make an assumption first. I'm assuming that everybody would love to be in a balanced budget, right?
Yeah.
I'm also assuming that there's not an influx of revenue to where we can intentionally plan to put into fund balance like we had during the COVID years. Okay, so those two assumptions aside, are you of the mindset that we would like to see a balanced budget, but if we also want to know what potential implications that's going to have on our school district, right?
What it took to get there.
Yeah, like if we do this, what does this mean from a sacrifice? Well, it means that every department had to cut their budget by 3%. It's probably doable. Or it means we got to cut 7 teachers and, 4 administrators. That's how we get there. Is it something like that you'd want to know that, but you want to operate from the premise that we want it to be balanced? And then help us understand, and then the board can help determine, look, we're going to referendum next year. We know our non-recurring is coming due. We could live with a deficit this year. If that's our situation, let's roll with it, and then let's plan for the next year so we know what we're asking the public for it. I mean, they're all hypotheticals. I'm wondering if that's what they would like or what you would like to see. I don't know, what does that entail for you? John, we would do what you're doing now, and then we would say, okay, we're projected to be 225 in the hole. If we want to get to 0 and we want that to be comfortable, these are some of the things we would have to do, or does that second part of it then blur into the operational?
To me, it feels a lot like a reduction in staff. Where if we were to say that we had to have we wanted a balanced budget. You have to tell us how we got there. To me, it's no different than saying, all right, well, we gotta reduce staff. How do you guys do it? If it's operational, obviously,
Specifics.
obviously you're gonna tell us the specifics, working through everything. In my mind, when I think of it, I guess, is if we were to go down the, show us a balanced budget and how we got there, like that to me is the most ideal road. Because I think it can be very easy for all of us to slip into, well, what do we need to cut? We start having those conversations, and now we're slipping back into the operational things where we're trying to figure out how to balance our budget. When really it's Mr. Bosworth, you know what I mean? To me, I kind of lean more towards number one, we should probably cut some of the meeting frequencies, but also probably show a balanced budget and how we got there. That's my opinion. Let them do the work, figure it out, and tell us this is what's gonna happen for us to get there. Then at least too, the public hears it. They don't hear for 5 months that, oh, we're negative X number of dollars, we're not really doing anything until, the time comes. We know what our state funding is and all this other stuff, like, at least we can tell them, look, we're budget neutral, but this is the path we're going down. If this, and this doesn't happen, which we don't know right now. That's where my head's at.
I can agree with that.
Just to throw another thought out there. Balanced budget, since we don't know what open enrollment numbers are gonna be, we don't necessarily know what our overall enrollment's gonna be. We were surprised by numbers for this school year. We planned on being down a lot further than what we ended up. Do we call a balanced budget with a 3% plus or minus? Or it's fixed dollar amount, so if it's within 50,000 or whatever that number is, we call that balanced, knowing that there is gonna be some flexibility and changes, whether it's revenue or, well, I guess it'd just be on the revenue side, you can pretty much know what the expenses are. If there's a surprise in insurance and all of a sudden that goes up, we weren't really expecting it, or fuel prices right now, good example where we had no idea, so budgeted, bus companies are having to shift what they're doing because they're spending a lot more on fuel. And we classify a 3% variance as balanced versus bottom line, revenues equals expenses and it's 0.
Put it in perspective a little bit, 3% is, close to $750,000, so I would not go that high, but.
Just
But
whatever
the
that
point
number
is a percentage, and we call that balance, so you don't have to cut another $63,000 and eliminate a staff when we may very well make up for that through something else, is what, I think that's your point, right?
And obviously right now we have a general fund balance, so we have some flexibility to be able to still cover our bills because of that. So do we, with having kind of a little bit of a moving target, we say, okay, we're off by 0.5%, 1%, whatever the number is, or specific dollar amount, we can still cover it if it really comes down to it. Or do we specify and say, yes, we have to have that emergency fund, that unassigned fund balance? I guess with our current practices, I think Aaron's correct that we're kind of living in all three right now.
I agree with that.
And I think that's kind of where I was going with that target range, because there are so many unknowns that play into it that I agree with that.
And John, when do you think, like, you could give us the most accurate, let's say, starting point, like like we were doing January, February, but it's kind of the same, but when do we really get to the meat of the budget? Because I know like the insurance, health insurance, can send you for a loop. Property insurance can send you for a loop. But, would that be like June? I mean, when you know like what the health insurance rates are gonna be for July, would you have them locked in by then, or would that be more May? That type of thing. Because I can agree with Aaron, if we're gonna just keep hearing the same thing, but not much is changing. I think it's nice to kind of know where we're at, but then, be able to have enough time to plan responsibly, to figure that out.
Staffing costs are for sure the biggest portion of the budget. So anytime we're gonna have a deficit, suggestions are typically gonna be about staffing. That's the biggest way to move a budget. So insurance, health insurance, seems like the last few years it's been April-ish before we've really had a good answer there. Staffing costs, salaries, wages, those are typically April, May. Property insurance, that whole umbrella. We've moved our renewal date to July 1 now, so all that is 3 months later than it used to be. So that's going to be a May scenario also. So June certainly seems realistic that we could give you some pretty accurate numbers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Which then is probably past the time teacher contracts for next year are issued.
Right.
You can issue contracts without having the negotiation part done. That's a process that that timeline could change, right? And could be done a little bit later. It's a little more difficult to get teachers organized in the summer for obvious reasons, but they could still be issued a contract and then their salaries for the next year determined, a little after June. But it's not true for people who start on July 1 and are full year employees. So, some of that stuff, a lot of that stuff, personnel wise, would have to be established. June would probably be late, I guess is what I'm saying.
So that's what I was wondering, just shouldn't be too late.
Well, could you do a forecast? I mean, you're always forecasting out the nature of your work, right? Like, could you do a forecast update in like February? Preliminary numbers and then a June. Just to give us, at that point you have a little idea.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. February, April and June might be better. With a big gap, February to June, there could be some bigger stuff that happens there. Wouldn't have to be a 35-minute presentation.
No.
Could be 50.
Could be 50. Could be 7.
Budget looks good.
Just record it. I've got information.
Maybe insurance will drop.
Or no, record it, put it to report.
There's
One thing I really should
Bring
be
me some money. Come on,
That's really where we have to have faith.
come on.
So,
You are on some pretty good drugs, aren't you?
so is there a way to, would it make sense, I guess, since we're currently operating with a 3-part hybrid where we're we're doing it now today, would it make sense for us as a board to say, hey, we want to maintain status quo, so we want to continue doing what we're doing and have that be the baseline? And if in 5 years or 3 years, 10 years, whatever the case might be, that we just, hey, you know what, we're not going to be able to maintain our fund balance. We're not going to be able to balance our budget or whatever. Would it make sense to have it structured today to just continue doing what we are today? And then obviously do the work to maintain what we're doing today.
But reduce the.
Right, and I think that's a completely separate
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But if we write it essentially what our current day practice is, because we talk about that a lot. Our policy is this, our current procedures are this. How do we get them to line up? And maybe we're not breaking policy or whatever the case is. Because if you feel we're in a good spot today with our budget and our budget process, why wouldn't we say, hey, yes, let's continue doing what we're doing? That was a question mark.
So we want some language that kind of reflects status quo and all three of those things wrapped
I'm
up,
just-
is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
At least
Throw
that's
that
your
out to the other
suggestion.
six.
Well, that's what we're doing today, so.
Okay, back to what Sheila had said earlier and reminded you of what I've said before. What happens in 7 years when, you know, you don't trust the person who's presenting that. Not because they're bad, but because you don't know, right? They're brand new. They've come from a Conema walk. You have no idea who they are. And is this gonna work for somebody like that? And are you okay with that?
I have a feeling fiscal responsibility and financials is gonna be coming out of this strategic planning thing. We might be able to more better define it later. That's what I think.
And if we're happy with the way you're presenting it now, is there some way to detail what, you know, your approach to it is right now? So for future board composition and administration, if they have some guideline to go on with your approach right now?
We probably do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It would be, I think that's kind of what I was asking John to begin with. What would have been helpful that we could put in now that would set up some, not only guidance, but guardrails.
All right, so let me throw this over there and type a couple of things here. Shall just, okay, something like superintendent shall present a financially sustainable budget that avoids structural deficits, preserves board-defined fund balance, and informs the board of future financial implications of budget decisions. Or something like that.
Sounds good.
I think that sounds good. Just rereading option 3, the board may authorize temporary use of reserves.
that would be part of the discussion. At that time, if there is something that we, hey, we had this scenario happen, we need to pull money out of fund balance, that's something. Of course, doing. But I think that
In fairness, we have to approve the budget, so we're gonna know that.
And if something comes up that was not planned for because whatever, come to the board, hey, this is gonna cost us X number of dollars, this will be taken care of by fund balance, then the board would approve that. I'll tweak that, but I think we've got general idea of what you're.
We all good on this? Big discussion, folks. All right, so I said earlier, in an effort for respectful of time here, we're gonna move off of 4A, we're gonna skip 4B. First on that, later meetings, we'll move on to 4C. So 4C is the discussion of regular board meeting dates and times. This is something that with the reorganization next week, wanted to put on this agenda this week with some options here to discuss so that come reorganization and we approve the calendar for 26-27. We already have a plan in place, so I thought this was a great platform to have that talk. Just there's some different ideas out there. There's a couple of plans, Mr. Board, I believe, gave you guys the handout. So there's I don't know, Mr. Board, you want to go through it?
Yeah, I can do that. Does everybody have one that's labeled draft? I think I stuck one there.
I don't have one. Thank you.
I know folks might be a little shocked, but hear me through when we get to it.
Okay, so these are just starting points and you are welcome to hybrid these things all you want. You may like something from this and add it to this. You'll get the general idea of some of the things. So these were just different things that over the course of the year, different board members have brought up. Aaron and I have discussed, so just try to get them on paper with actual dates. And I apologize, there's no page numbers, but the first one is basically governance on the first Wednesday plan. Okay, so this would basically be a calendar all year on how we started this governance model. First Wednesday of the month would be governance meeting. Second Wednesday of the month would be regular board meeting. Fourth Wednesday of the month would be regular board meeting. Okay, and then rinse and repeat. You'll notice on all of these, about 2/3 of the way down the page, the Wednesday, October 21st, the annual meeting that's in italicized print, that can't be changed. That's chiseled in stone, set at the last annual meeting. And then you'll see a couple of crossed out dates through all these, especially the ones that reflect a Wednesday. That's Wednesday, November 25th, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And Wednesday, December 23rd, which is right before Christmas. This past year, that was Christmas Eve, I believe. As you start getting into, maybe the 23rd is okay, 22nd is probably okay. Like you'll have to decide where that second meeting in December sits, or maybe the board just like, hey, one meeting in December is fine anyway. So that's what the first page and the back page is like, from starting in May through next April, all of the different dates, governance, regular, skip, regular, for a 4-week schedule. The second plan is governance on the third Wednesday. That's similar to what we're doing right now, right? Regular board meeting on the second, governance on the third, regular board meeting on the fourth. Again, very similar. Some of the dates change a little bit, but not too much different. I think we lose a couple of meetings just because the third meeting falls on the annual board meeting, so you wouldn't have a governance meeting in October, or you'd have to adjust that accordingly. The third plan is the Easter plan. And this would be adjusting during the traditional, there's not a lot that goes on Wednesdays, but I do know during the Lenten season, there's Wednesdays. So this would be shifting that down at the bottom there. It says it's in blue, but then I printed it in black and white, so it doesn't help you. But the last five on that page all show Monday. I mean, the top line of the next page shows Monday. Those would be basically from the start of Ash Wednesday through Easter. And that would obviously change from year to year. That's what that would be. And then the last plan, which is on the last page, is the 2 meetings a month plan, where instead of meeting 3 times a month, we cut it down to 2. One of those meetings, this particular one has it on the second Wednesday of the month, but they could easily be flip-flopped. Second Wednesday of the month would be primarily a governance meeting where the board is focusing on those results and monitoring. And then any regular board agenda items that are time sensitive that you have to fit in there. And then the fourth Wednesday of the month would be a regular board meeting. And I suppose the opposite could also be true if there was just really something that you needed from a governance standpoint. There's a little bit of talk amongst us that, well, maybe just make them all regular and we'll just, interweave the governance meetings as needed. My personal and professional opinion is that I think that there's something to be said for explicitly saying this is a governance meeting and we're going to focus on those pillars that the community has stated and where are we at with these things, and as revolves around results and these policies that we're talking about. So I think there's a lot of merit in that. I'm not saying it can't be done the other way, but I do think that there's merit in having it explicitly. And again, you can obviously mix and match if you like that last plan, but you want it on the first and third. You want to still account for the Easter season, you can mix and match any of those. But those are just a couple of different plans and what it would look like. I think I've covered everything, but you may have more to add there.
Yeah, the 2 meetings a month plan, it pretty much came from as we have decoupled managing the day-to-day. Our meetings for quite a while have been an hour or less. And of that time, about the first 20 to 25 minutes is repeated every single meeting. So really, by going to a 2 meeting model, that first 20, 25 minutes is automatically gone. Like that's time saved that we can do something else with. And we have done this and we can do it in the future too, is, we can use the governance meeting to conduct regular board business and take action on something if we have to. We can do, if we have a new policy, we have to have a public hearing on it. There's 2 readings of it. We can use the governance meeting as, you hold that first public hearing meeting on the first reading on the governance, and then take action and have your second reading on your regularly scheduled board meeting. So there's a lot of things a lot of flexibility in this. So wanted to throw it out there as an option. I know a lot of us are very busy people, so, and as we've gotten more efficient in our meetings, I think it's something we can try. If the majority is okay with it. But then I'd also say too, if we can go to a 2 meeting a month model, can we start meetings at 6 o'clock? If we can, let's just say you have a 3-hour meeting because you have to go to close for something like teacher contracts or whatever. 6 to 9 is more manageable than 7 to 10 for most people. But then I know that there's also a time constraint getting there, earlier too. So just want to pick people's brains tonight so that we can talk about this, have a plan and forward, and then come next Wednesday, we just vote on it and move forward, so. But there's 4 options in here. We have how we do it today. And then we have it flipping the governance meeting to the 3rd Wednesday, adjusting for Easter. Those are all 3 meeting a month scenarios. The last one then being a 2 meeting per month plan. Some feedback from folks on all 4 scenarios.
Just out of clarification, on the 2 meeting a month plan, with the regular board meeting be at 6 and the governance meeting be at 6 also, or would governance meeting be at 6?
That would be the idea, just for consistency. And if 6 o'clock doesn't work, on a Wednesday, is there another day of the week? You can always shift it around too, that way, get creative too, or do we keep it at 7? So whole purpose of this is to, talk about it and so we can come up with a plan moving forward.
I like Wednesdays.
I know you're busy.
Yeah, and not adjusting for Easter.
3 boards.
And some.
And a lot of committees.
Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday. And it is easy just to consistently go Wednesday.
Wednesdays do work well, even in the school schedules, Wednesdays work pretty well.
Very few conflicts with Wednesdays.
I would prefer to read them on Wednesdays myself too. There's a lot fewer school conflicts.
As well.
And I'm pretty sure every other day of the week for you is no call.
And as far as 6 or 7, I'm flexible.
I'm flexible on the time. I personally like the 2 meetings a month. I think for a couple of reasons. One, I think we have gotten efficient. And the other thing too is I think when people are looking to run for these positions, I think if you have them down to 2 meetings a month, I know, for example, city councils dropped to 1 meeting a month. I think that's a little hard personally because that's a long span. But if you have 2 meetings a month, personally, I think that would fit, but that's just me.
6 gets tight, 7 I can pretty much guarantee it, but 6 gets tight for me. Especially summer.
6:30 do anything, or is it just a little bit better chance?
Yeah, it's a better chance, yeah.
Do you have a preference of 2 or 3?
No.
Oh,
You just did that Easter.
yeah, just not that one a month. Wednesdays. It doesn't matter. I mean, with that to me, as far as, if we're gonna interchange one or the other or do like what you said, at the end of the governance meeting, if we have to take care of something, take care of it. Yes. But just because I know how
Wednesdays work best.
and I know how tight schedules can be and how all of that stuff. Let's work with Brady.
Yeah.
So that's why we're talking.
I'm open to either 2 meetings, 3 meetings that. It's on my calendar, so I plan around meetings on Wednesdays. For me personally, I missed being able to participate in Lent services. Just my involvement with church, so. I personally prefer to move the Wednesdays during Lent to a different day, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, I'm open to whatever that might be. you have to come in on a Saturday, that's not cool, but
Well, Sunday.
if it's 7 o'clock at night, sure, that's not a problem. Churches don't like that.
Just maybe on Sundays. Yeah, and so far. Yeah, it's a mix of, doesn't matter to me if it's 2 or 3, but Wednesday. 2 meetings. 7 o'clock, right?
Yep.
And Easter, moving it from Wednesdays to Monday. Or, does Mondays work for you
Monday?
with your board schedules? Or is there a different day during Easter for like those 5 weeks or so? That would work best for you.
Here.
Cause I can be flexible, I don't have a life.
Yeah.
And we're actually talking about.
It'd be
Well-
6 weeks.
Yeah, if you go to the 2 meetings a month, you're probably down to 4 of the
That's
6.
what I'm looking at, yeah.
I think it's, let's see, February 10th through March. I think Easter's on the 28th of,
It included the 24th.
through the 24th. Yep. So it would be 4 on that last page. It would be the
Yeah.
10th, the 24th, the 10th, and the 24th.
So Tuesday is gonna be the full redirectional, meeting of who gets, if there's gonna be a new chair, if there's a new vice chair, who's put on committee and committees, who's going on this committee and that committee, it's all gonna be reorganized Tuesday. So that's up in the air if any of these Mondays work, because if I end up going on to a committee that is meeting on a Monday, depending on what Monday it meets, it's only gonna meet possibly once a month, possibly twice a month. But I know right now, the Executive Finance Committee is on Mondays, and it's the second Monday currently right now. And I believe the 4th Monday is when they meet. So,
Scott's open to Saturdays, are you?
yeah, I'm free Saturday. I have nothing booked on Saturday.
I will add just back to the Easter thing, and I don't know if this is true for all churches. I can only speak for the one I know. But I believe most, the week before Easter is probably not Wednesday night. It's probably Thursday night. I think it's that Monday, Thursday. So probably wouldn't even affect the Wednesday, the 24th. So if we went to the 2 meetings a month, you're probably just looking at 3, which is, in my opinion, significantly better than the 6.
And then
6:30.
So.
6:45.
that's fine. That's fine.
There you go.
6:42.
6:31.
Yeah.
6 Mountain Time.
7 is fine.
Yeah, I don't, if we had to go till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, when I first came on, we were doing 11, 12 o'clock anyway. As long as it's not a regular thing, I personally don't have an issue with having, if we have to run longer to accomplish our business for one Wednesday out of 6 meetings.
We're already gonna save 20 to 25 minutes a meeting.
Yeah.
By not rinsing and repeating everything through the modified agenda.
Mm.
We're gonna do it once, not twice. So our regularly scheduled meeting could still be short, like an hour, if we have to go closed. We do it a lot less frequent now, but when we do, it's typically an hour and a half, so. We have the governance meeting to flex as we need it, and if we ever had to pull and do a special meeting, we can do that too. That's never off the table. If you have to do 1 or 2 or 3 of them a year, because we get really busy with something or whatever, like, I don't think any of us would complain about 3 months out of the year, or something having 3 meetings versus every month of the year having 3 meetings, and 2 of them lasted an hour.
Mhm.
But sounds like we're all cool with it, or anybody adamantly opposed?
Did we decide that those 3 days for Easter would be moved to Monday?
Yes.
Yes.
And if it doesn't fit your schedule, there's nothing to say we can't move it to a different day. Yeah, right, Mr. Gordon. We can absolutely move it if we have to.
Yeah, as long as we properly notice everything, we certainly can do that.
And obviously, you'd have to have a quorum, so if it's 5 or 6 people instead of all 7. in one meeting. And that,
But I like keeping those at 7, because as I'm playing this out in my head, how everything goes. If, like if I am on executive and finance and it meets at 5, hopefully be out of there by 7. Be here by 7, you know, just playing the whole thing out in my head. So I like,
Bring your extra candy bars.
That's the deal.
Snack.
Always have sugar and chocolate.
Okay, so
doesn't
just,
mean I have to share, always have. Crazy night.
so I can accurately write the memo and have it prepared what you're seeing here. What I'm hearing is the last page, 2 meetings a month plan. Moving February 10th, February 24th, and March 10th to 2 days before each of them, Monday the 8th, Monday the 22nd, and Monday the 8th. Keeping it at 7 o'clock. Am I good so far? That's what everybody's saying? Okay, then a couple of logistical things. One, how does the board feel about calling it a governance meeting versus just a regular meeting? Yes to what?
Governance.
Yes, governance.
Okay.
Governance plus.
Okay, okay, then with that, public comments on governance meetings? Or leaving that for regular board meetings? Doesn't necessarily have to be decided right now, but I'm just curious what the governance meetings will look like as we start to plan and post them. I mean, we'll have them pretty quickly. May 13th.
I guess I think because what we're doing right now in our governance meetings is creating it. So there really isn't a need for public comment at this point. We're gonna have our hive event. It's gonna give us a really good direction, but once we get into the working through it, we have it in place, all the policies are approved. Then it's gonna turn into where there's an opportunity for public to say, hey, we don't think this is working the way we thought it would. Or this scenario came up, so I think having public comment for that is,
At that time,
makes sense.
but probably not right now.
Once we get once we get to the, everything's approved and it's in place, and then we're working through it and then having scenarios that come up in situations, that it makes sense to have public comment.
Sure, okay, makes total sense. Okay, and then as far as like those pre-recorded reports, is it okay then? I'll try to keep them all in the regular meetings, but that might mean that there are 3 or 4 as opposed to 1 or 2. Is that okay? And those work okay for you folks?
Mhm.
All right, perfect. All right, what about financials? Is that something you want to see just once a month? Or do you want to slide the financials and see that financial statement as part of the governance meeting? Just once, I'm hearing from Jill.
Say once.
Is there anything that would cause an issue to just do it once instead of twice? Would it change anything in the office? 'Cause a lot of times it's the line. Checks have already been sent out.
Yeah, that wouldn't change. It would just be a much bigger document for you to look through and dollar values would be bigger. But It wouldn't change anything.
I'm okay with that. Going once.
Nobody seems like they're against that. And then lastly, I wrote these all in this draft for the high school. Do we still want to go on location to the other buildings?
Yes. Especially when we get treats from the primary.
Order mac and cheese.
You want to try to do one at Partner?
I think it would be great. It would be, yeah.
Throw Melville.
You want to try to do one on Melville this first year or wait until we actually get that and
Wait till you see what-
Later, do it
Until we
later next
actually own it.
school year. Do it-
That would,
Just do Melville like this time next year.
right?
yeah, at the end of
The
the
day
year,
we open there.
I don't know, ask her.
opening day.
We're getting close. I've been close for a while, but-
Nothing.
Yeah, I think we need to continue the.
County question.
What is it?
the other schools.
Oh, it's opening day.
Obviously, it changes things with the dynamic.
A lot of, I'm not opposed to it. We'll do whatever the board wants. There's a lot of logistics that go into the IT now that we're streaming things and trying to do all that. But if that's what the board wants to do, we can make that happen.
Have to wait and see what the new board says.
After everybody's sworn in, that's it. All right, I'll have the draft to reflect one and you can change it accordingly. All right, those are my questions.
Yeah, that board might be difficult.
Yeah. You never know what you're getting.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I truly appreciate all of you, because I think it's a big testament, for us to like, go for the move into 2 meetings. I mean, if you think about it, a year ago, most of us were coming to 3 meetings a month, plus committees and having this other stuff. We're here all the time. So, we get to this point, it's feels pretty good, so. Seriously, thank you.
We have one more question. If you look at that last page, if we do governance on the 1st and regular on the 3rd, in November and December, the 3rd falls on those, or excuse me, the 2nd and the 4th, falls on those before Christmas, before Thanksgiving. Is that okay? And we just take care of any regular business on the governance meeting nights, or do we flip those, or?
We're just gonna plan for a hybrid on both sides.
Or is there an advantage to being first and third instead of second and fourth?
That's
Are there
also a
things that-
valid question.
Anything that creates issues with getting things put together for this?
No,
First
I
Wednesday of
don't
the
think so, unless there's financial. I mean, you're gonna run into different holidays like January 1st and 4th of July. We're gonna run into those as opposed to Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think either way you end up with two holidays that are potentially impacted. So if November 11th and December 9th can certainly be both.
Yeah.
That night, just once a month, or you could, go from, you could do the 2nd and the 3rd on those two months. The governance on the 11th and the regular on, what would that be, the 18th of November, do something like that as well.
Just back-to-back weeks.
Yeah.
Please do that.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
plan those.
Just do that.
Yeah,
You guys okay with that?
What dates are those? I was looking up the first and third.
November, December, just do first and second week.
No, 2nd and 3rd.
Third weeks, instead of second and fourth,
Okay, so November is first and second.
second.
Second, third.
So it'd be the 11th and the 18th of
We'll have a
November.
new sheet next week.
I'll put this all in for
It'll be that next
next
week, you can.
Wednesday's
Yeah.
report.
That's what I was actually looking at those
10,
Mondays,
17.
if they were first and third.
10th and 17th.
November 10th and 17th.
Oh, wait, I'm making. 27, 26.
Yes.
It's 11.
November 11, November 18, December 9th, December 16th.
Yes.
All right, I'll just plan on those. Okay, now I'm done.
Officially.
Oh, for sure.
Everybody good? Okay. The two meeting model to really work, everybody should become very well prepared to all meetings.
Oh, you're saying we're not.
Keep them efficient, keep them efficient. All right, it is 9:10. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Brian seconded it. Didn't have his mic on.
Who did I?
I don't want to be the first one again. This time I did it first. time.
Any other discussion?
Aye.
I.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
That we don't know. We just want to stay.
Do we want to just get a board picture next Wednesday?
You
Like
should
it's
set up.
Someone.
I'm supposed to go to somewhere.
Uh-huh.